The Duke ignored the bride to claim the invisible sister. They hid her in the shadows, dressed in gray, while her cruel sister shone in white. But when the Duke arrived, he didn't look at the diamond-clad bride. He walked right past her to the girl hiding in the corner. Why did the most powerful man in England choose the Wallflower over the beauty queen? The answer will leave you breathless. Subscribe now for more satisfying stories where the underdog wins. The ballroom of the Vale estate was designed to amplify light. Crystal chandeliers, heavy with the wax of 1,000 beeswax candles, hung like frozen waterfalls from the vaulted ceiling. Mirrors, gilded in gold leaf, lined the walls, bouncing the reflection of silk, satin, and jewels, until the room felt not like a physical space, but a kaleidoscope of wealth. Marianne Vale stood in the one place the light did not reach, a small alcove behind a massive arrangement of white hydrangeas near the servants' entrance. She adjusted the cuff of her dress. It was a pale gray, a shade her mother had selected specifically because it disappeared against the stone walls of the manor. "You are there to facilitate, Marianne," her mother, Lady Vale, had said that morning, her eyes critical as she scanned Marianne's reflection. "Not to participate. Saraphene is the sun today. You are the dusk. Necessary, but brief." Marianne didn't resent the description. In fact, she found a strange comfort in the shadows. From here, she could observe without being scrutinized. She watched her sister, Saraphene, holding court in the center of the room. Saraphene was undeniable, a vision in white lace and pearls, laughing with her head thrown back, her throat exposed, drinking in the adoration of the county's eligible bachelors. She was beautiful, yes, but it was a frantic, demanding beauty. It required constant fuel. "Stop slouching," a sharp whisper cut through the hydrangeas. Marianne straightened instinctively. Her mother didn't look at her. Lady Vale was smiling radiantly at a passing baronet, but the venom in her voice was directed entirely at the alcove. "The Duke is arriving. If you knock over that vase, I will have you sent to the scullery for the rest of the season." "Yes, mother," Marianne murmured. The room changed. It wasn't a sound, exactly, but a shift in air pressure. The chatter, which had been a roar of gossip and laughter, dropped to a hushed murmur. Then, silence. It was the silence of predators, recognizing a larger predator entering the territory. The double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. Arthur Penhaligon, the Duke of Thornfield, did not stride in. He walked with a terrifying economy of motion. He was taller than the rumors suggested, broad-shouldered in a black tailcoat that seemed to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it. His face was not the soft, powdered mask of the local gentry. It was sharp, weathered by travel, with dark eyes that scanned the room not with pleasure, but with a bored, almost clinical detachment. He was the wealthiest man in 3 counties. He was the reason this party had been thrown. He was the prize Saraphene had been groomed since birth to catch. Marianne watched him, safe in her invisibility. She saw something the others missed. She saw the way his hand twitched toward his pocket, as if checking for a watch, wishing the time away. She saw the slight tightness at the corner of his jaw. He hates this, she realized, with a jolt of surprise. He hates the noise. He hates the performance. Saraphene, sensing her moment, glided forward. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She executed a curtsy that was technically perfect, her lashes fluttering as she rose. "Your Grace," Saraphene purred, her voice pitched to carry. "We are honored you could grace our humble celebration." It was a rehearsed line. Marianne knew. She had helped Saraphene memorize it while pinning the hem of that dress 3 hours ago. The Duke looked at Saraphene. He looked at her diamonds, her perfectly curled hair, her expectant smile. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched, becoming thin and brittle. "The honor is mine," the Duke said finally. His voice was deep, a low rumble of baritone that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. But his eyes didn't stay on Saraphene. They moved past her. They moved past the mother, who was beaming with predatory anticipation. They moved past the earls and the countesses. They swept the room, searching, until they landed on the alcove of hydrangeas. Marianne froze. "He can't see me," she told herself. "I am the dusk. I am gray against stone." But the Duke's gaze sharpened. He tilted his head slightly, his brow furrowing. He wasn't looking at the flowers. He was looking through them. He was looking directly at her. For the first time in her 22 years, Marianne felt the physical sensation of being perceived. It wasn't a warm wash of affection. It was a shock. Like cold water. He saw her, and more terrifyingly, he didn't look away. He took a step forward, ignoring Saraphene, who was poised to take his arm. "Who is that?" the Duke asked. His voice was not a whisper. It cut through the silent room. Lady Vale stepped in, her smile tight, panic flickering in her eyes. "Oh, merely a distant relation. Your Grace. A helper. Someone of no consequence. Please, the orchestra is waiting for you to lead the—" "No consequence?" The Duke repeated the phrase, as if tasting it, finding it sour. He walked past Saraphene. He walked past Lady Vale. The crowd turned. A sea of confused faces. As the Duke of Thornfield crossed the polished floor, his boots clicking rhythmically, heading straight for the shadows where Marianne stood trembling. He stopped 3 feet from her. Up close, he smelled of sandalwood, rain, and cold iron. "You," he said softly, "you are the one who arranged these flowers." It wasn't a question. Marianne looked up, her breath caught in her throat. Yes, Your Grace." The florist was late. "I merely salvaged them." "You didn't salvage them," the Duke said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You created balance where there was chaos. It is the only honest thing in this entire room." He extended a hand. A gloved hand. A hand that could command armies and dissolve debts. "Come out of the dark," he said. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually followed a drop tray of crystal glasses, shocked, jagged, and breathless. Marianne stared at the Duke's hand. The white glove was pristine, the fingers long and steady. In her peripheral vision, she could see her mother's face. Lady Vale had gone pale, her mouth slightly open, the polite mask slipping to reveal sheer, unadulterated horror. Beside her, Saraphene looked as though she had been slapped. Her perfect smile was frozen, but her eyes were darting around the room, gauging the humiliation. "Refuse him," Marianne's internal training screamed. "Apologize. Retreat. You are the gray dress. You are the dusk." Marianne's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, trying to find the ground beneath her feet. "Your Grace, I am not dressed for dancing. I am not meant to be on the floor. The floor is wood and wax," the Duke said, his tone conversational, as if there weren't 300 people holding their breath watching them. "It does not care who steps on it. And as for your dress—" His eyes swept over her simple gray gown, devoid of lace or jewels. "It is the color of a storm cloud. It suits you far better than the confectionery surrounding us." He didn't withdraw his hand. He waited. It was the patience that broke her. If he had demanded, she might have fled, but he was offering her a choice. He was giving her agency in a room designed to strip her of it. Slowly, terrifyingly, Marianne reached out. When her fingertips brushed his palm, a jolt of electricity ran up her arm, not the romantic spark of novels, but the grounding shock of reality. His grip was firm, warm, and solid. He pulled her gently from the alcove. As she stepped into the light, she felt naked. The whispers began a low hiss of who and why, and "Look at her shoes." "Chin up," the Duke murmured, leaning down so only she could hear. "Do not give them the satisfaction of seeing you flinch. They are sheep. You are the shepherd. Simply because I am holding your hand." He led her to the center of the room. He nodded to the conductor. The orchestra, terrified of offending the guest of honor, immediately struck up a waltz. The Duke placed his hand on her waist. It was a respectful touch, yet possessive enough to send a clear signal to the room. She is with me." They began to move. Marianne was a competent dancer. She had been forced to learn so she could teach Saraphene the steps, but she had never danced like this. The Duke moved with a fluid power. He didn't just lead. He created a space where she could only follow, sweeping her through the turns with an ease that made her feel weightless. "Why?" she asked, the word escaping before she could stop it. They were spinning near the edge of the floor, momentarily out of earshot of the gawking crowd. "Why what?" The Duke looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "Why me? My sister is the beauty. My mother is the hostess. I am the one who fixes the hems. You are making a mistake, Your Grace. You are embarrassing them." "I am embarrassing no one who does not deserve it," he replied coolly. Then, his expression softened. "And I did not ask you to dance to make a point, Miss Vale. I asked you because for the last hour I have watched you." Marianne stumbled slightly. He tightened his grip to steady her. "You watched me? I watched you fix the hem of the Viscount's coat when he didn't notice. I watched you guide the nervous debutante to the punch bowl when she looked like she might faint. And I watched you retreat to the shadows every time someone laughed too loud." He spun her again, the room blurring into a streak of gold and candle flame. "You are the only person here who is listening. Everyone else is merely waiting for their turn to speak. I find I have a desperate need for someone who listens." The song ended too soon. The final chord hung in the air. Before the applause could start, and it would be polite, confused applause, the Duke did not release her. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "It is stifling in here," he announced to the room at large, though he looked only at her. "Miss Vale has agreed to show me the view from the terrace." He didn't wait for her to agree. He didn't wait for Lady Vale's permission. He simply walked her toward the French doors, sweeping her out of the suffocating heat of the ballroom and into the cool, blue night. As the doors closed behind them, muffling the music and the whispers, Marianne took her first deep breath of the evening. The air smelled of damp earth and jasmine. "You have ruined me," she whispered, looking out at the dark garden. "My mother will never forgive this." The Duke walked to the stone balustrade and leaned against it, looking not at the view, but at her. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, softening the severity of his eyes. "Then it is a good thing," Arthur said quietly, "that I have no intention of returning you to her." 3 days later, the carriage from Thornfield arrived at the Vale estate. It was not empty. It contained a handwritten invitation, sealed with the Duke's personal crest, a wolf rampant. The invitation was not for the family. It was specifically addressed to Miss Marianne Vale, requesting her presence for tea and a viewing of the Duke's library. Lady Vale had been apoplectic. She had spent 2 hours trying to convince Marianne that it was a mistake, a clerical error, or perhaps a cruel joke. Saraphene had locked herself in her room, weeping loudly about the injustice of plain Jane's stealing crumbs. But Marianne went. Thornfield Manor was a beast of a house, Gothic, sprawling, and imposing. But as the butler led her through the corridors, Marianne noticed the dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight. It wasn't a museum. It was a home that was too large for one man. The library was the heart of the house. It was a cavernous room, 2 stories high, with spiraling iron staircases and walls lined with leather-bound books that smelled of vanilla and age. The Duke Arthur, as she was beginning to think of him, was not sitting formally. He was atop a ladder, his coat discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up, holding a book. "You came," he said, looking down. He sounded relieved. "You summoned me," Marianne replied, standing by the fireplace. "One does not refuse a duke. One does if one is your mother," Arthur muttered, descending the ladder. He wiped a smudge of dust from his hand onto his trousers, a gesture so unaristocratic it made Marianne smile. "She thinks you are mocking us," Marianne said honestly. "She thinks you are toying with the mouse before the cat eats it. I have no interest in games." Arthur walked over to a small table set with tea, but instead of sitting, he paced. "I asked you here because I wanted to know if the silence was real." Marianne frowned. "The silence? At the ball, we danced, we spoke on the terrace, But mostly, we existed in silence. With most women, with most people, silence is an empty space they feel compelled to fill with chatter about the weather or the king or their new bonnet. With you. He stopped, looking at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. With you. The silence felt like a conversation. It felt like rest. He gestured to the room. This is who I am, Marianne. Not the title, not the land. This. Books. Dust. History. Quiet. My father was a man of noise. He filled this house with parties and hunting dogs and shouting. I have spent 10 years trying to exorcise the noise from these walls. Marianne walked toward the shelves. She ran a finger along the spine of a book, a collection of botanical illustrations. I used to hide in the library at home, she confessed softly. When Saraphene was learning the piano, she plays very loudly. And very badly I would hide in the section on architecture. I liked the drawings. Structural integrity. Balance. Things that don't fall down just because you yell at them. Arthur laughed. It was a rusty sound. Deep and genuine. Things that don't fall down just because you yell at them. A fine philosophy for life. He moved closer to her. The distance between them was shrinking, charged with a magnetic pull. Tell me, he said, his voice dropping. What do you want? Not what your mother wants for you. Not what society expects. If you could have anything, what would it be? Marianne looked at him. She thought of the gray dress. She thought of the years of being useful but never wanted. I want to be seen, she said, her voice trembling. I don't want to be the dusk anymore. I don't want to be the sun. Either, it burns too bright. I want to be the light in the window. Steady, warm. There. Arthur reached out and took her hand. This time, he didn't wear gloves. His skin was rougher than she expected. Ink stained on the thumb. You are, he whispered. God, Marianne, you are the only light I have seen in years. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. It was too soon, and the moment was too fragile. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. It was more intimate than any embrace. It was a promise. I have a collection of architectural blueprints from the 17th century, he said, lowering her hand, but not letting go. Would you like to see them? Marianne smiled, and, for the first time, it was a smile that reached her eyes, unburdened by fear. I would like that very much. The courtship for that is what it was, though the word felt too small for the gravitational shift occurring between them, lasted a month. It was a month of scandal for the county and a month of slow, blooming joy for Marianne. However, reality has a way of intruding on dreams. Lady Vale and Saraphene arranged a casual visit to Thornfield. Protocol dictated that the Duke could not refuse them without causing a rift that would reach London. They arrived with trunks of dresses and a grim determination. They found Marianne and Arthur in the gardens. Thornfield's gardens were famous. There was the French section, geometric, clipped, controlled, a testament to man's dominance over nature. And then, past the stone wall, was the English garden, wild, winding, overgrown with ivy and roses that spilled over the paths. Marianne and Arthur were in the wild section. Marianne was sketching a crumbling stone fountain. Arthur was reading aloud to her. Your Grace, Saraphene's voice shattered the peace. She came sweeping down the path, wearing a dress of bright crimson that clashed violently with the greenery. She held a parasol like a weapon. Lady Vale followed, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. Arthur closed his book with a snap. His posture changed instantly, from the relaxed man of the library to the imposing Duke of the ballroom. Lady Vale, Miss Saraphene. His greeting was ice. We were worried about dear Marianne, Lady Vale said, eyeing Marianne's sketchbook with disdain. She has been spending so much time here. We feared she was imposing on your kindness. Marianne, you look flushed. You really should wear a bonnet. You'll get freckles. I like her freckles, Arthur said. Saraphene laughed, a tinkling, brittle sound. Oh, Your Grace is too kind. But really, Marianne is such a child about these things. She doesn't understand the complexities of running an estate. She prefers doodling. She gestured vaguely at the sketchbook. I, however, have been studying the layout of your conservatory. It is dreadfully outdated. I have ideas on how to modernize it. She stepped closer to Arthur, invading his personal space, placing a hand on his arm. A man of your stature needs a hostess who understands presentation. Someone who can stand beside you, not behind you. It was a direct attack. Marianne felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize, to fade into the gray background. She began to close her sketchbook. No, she thought. I am the light in the window. Before she could speak, Arthur stepped away from Saraphene, causing her hand to drop awkwardly to her side. You misunderstand the nature of this estate, Miss Saraphene, Arthur said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a thunderclap. And you misunderstand me. He turned to look at the manicured French garden in the distance. That garden over there? The one you admire? It is rigid. It requires constant cutting, constant forcing, constant violence to maintain its shape. It is exhausting. He turned back to the wild garden, then to Marianne. This place, he gestured to the ivy and the crumbling fountain, grows as it should. It has deep roots. It breathes. It is beautiful because it is authentic. He walked over to Marianne and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, a united front. You speak of Marianne doodling, Arthur continued, his eyes hardening as he looked at Lady Vale. Yet, in the last week, she has helped me reorganize the estate accounts, identified a structural flaw in the West Wing, and discussed philosophy with me that would leave most of your eligible bachelors bewildered. She does not stand behind me, madam. She stands with me, and frankly, she towers over the both of you in every way that matters. Lady Vale gasped. Saraphene's face crumbled, the beautiful mask dissolving into ugly shock. We will leave, Lady Vale hissed, gathering her skirts. Come, Saraphene. We are clearly not welcome. You are welcome as guests, Arthur said, but not as critics, and certainly not as bullies. As they retreated up the path, angry splashes of color against the green. Marianne felt a trembling start in her hands. You didn't have to do that, she said. They are my family. They are your relatives, Arthur corrected. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. Family is the people who protect you. And I intend to be your family, Marianne, if you will have me. The proposal did not happen at a grand ball. It did not happen with fireworks. It happened in the quiet of the morning, 2 weeks after the garden incident. Marianne was in the library again, organizing the architectural blueprints Arthur had shown her. She was humming a tune under her breath, a habit she had suppressed for years because her mother called it common. Arthur walked in. He looked nervous. It was a charming look on a man who usually terrified half the House of Lords. Marianne. She turned, smiling. The 1,650 blueprints are missing the drainage schematics. I think they might be filed under agriculture by mistake. Forget the drainage, Arthur said. He walked over to the table and pushed the blueprints aside. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't new. The velvet was worn at the corners. My mother, Arthur began, his voice raspy, left me the family diamonds. Great, gaudy things. Massive stones that catch the light and blind everyone in the room. They are in the vault in London. Saraphene would have loved them. He opened the box. Inside sat a ring of gold, hammered and ancient. In the center was not a diamond, but a sapphire. It was dark, deep, and oceanic. It didn't sparkle aggressively. It glowed with an inner, steady fire. This was my grandmother's, Arthur said. She was a woman who preferred books to balls. She planted the wild garden. She taught me that the most valuable things are the ones that endure, not the ones that flash. He took the ring from the box. Marianne Vale, you have spent your life being told you are invisible. But from the moment I walked into that ballroom, you are the only thing I have been able to see. You are the quiet in my noise. You are the truth in a room full of lies." He didn't kneel. He stood eye to eye with her, treating her as an equal. "Will you marry me? Will you take this ring, and this house, and this grumpy, tired man, and make a life that is ours?" Marianne looked at the sapphire. It was beautiful. It was dusk and storm clouds and deep water. It was her. She looked up at him, tears finally spilling over, not tears of sadness, but of relief. The sheer, overwhelming relief of being known. "I will," she whispered. "I will." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Epilogue. The wedding was small. This was the first scandal. The second scandal was that the bride did not wear white. Marianne wore a dress of deep, shimmering blue silk, the color of the evening sky just after the sun has set. Saraphene attended, sitting in the back, pale and quiet. Lady Vale was there, stiff and polite, terrified of losing her connection to the dukedom entirely. But Marianne barely saw them. She stood at the altar, in the small chapel on the Thornfield estate. The air smelled of beeswax and rain. She looked at Arthur, who was looking at her with that same intense, terrifying focus he had shown in the ballroom. "You look beautiful," he mouthed. "I look like myself," she mouthed back. And as the priest began to speak, Marianne Vale, soon to be Marianne Penhaligon, Duchess of Thornfield, realized that the shadows she had lived in for so long were not a prison. They had been a cocoon. She had emerged not as a different person, but as the person she had always been, finally standing in the light that was meant for her. She squeezed Arthur's hand. He squeezed back. They walked out of the chapel and into the wild garden, leaving the performance behind, ready to begin the real story.